we are waiting for Mr. Celente, and as soon as my board operator gets him up. Yeah, while it affords me a few more minutes to make some more comments. Look, I said this yesterday. Some people seem to think that, geez, it was supposed to be bigger, the bombing at the Boston Marathon. And if you're some kind of Middle East terrorist and you're trying to make a point, what, an 8-year-old was killed and another individual, a lot of people injured. Middle East style, folks, these bombs take out city blocks. At any rate, we'll get into more of that into the next hour. I know a lot of people have questions about it, and we'll dive into that next hour, but I have Gerald Celente. I've only got this guy one time a month, and his time today is limited, so let's get to it. Buongiorno, my friend.
Buongiorno.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and how about you?
Well, geez, I was watching the images of the Boston Marathon, and with the sound turned down, I looked at my wife, and I said, now, what's going on in the hallowed hollow there of Congress, the hallowed halls? We've got, we're going to allow millions of illegals to stay in the country. We're in the middle, obviously, of a financial meltdown. We've got gun stuff going on. We've got a plethora of political hot potatoes that are going on. And, Gerald, I remember when we first went into Kuwait back in the early 90s, 3 days of Zsa Zsa Gabor slapped a cop. Literally, that's what the media was concentrating on. And we were invading Kuwait. So after 3 days of Zsa Zsa lost it and slapped a dear police officer, then we learned from the media that we were invading some country in the Middle East. There's a lot of things going on. North Korea, that has taken a back seat now. We're ready to go to nuclear DEFCON 1 with these guys. Who knows? But in the meantime, since I've had you on, some interesting developments have happened with the world's financial wizards. Bailouts, bail-ins, stealing funds. God.
John, anybody who questions the value of gold, and, first of all, in the TrendsJournal, there are no advertisements. Secondly, I'm not paid by anybody to say what I say. We take no money from anyone other than subscribers who, subscribe to the TrendsJournal. So what I have to say is not for any hidden agenda. Let's suppose you were a Greek Cypriot, and the banks are closed for nearly 2 weeks. ATM machines can't get anything out of them. You have no money. You think if you had gold or silver, it would buy you something? Not only would it buy you something, you'd probably get a great deal on anything that you had. And that's what gold is really about for me. And so as we watch the price go down, I began buying gold in 1978. My first buy was $187.50 an ounce. And I also bought, I bought on the highest day when it collapsed too, in 1980. And I remember the 80s downdraft very well. Very different time. And this is what people don't have an understanding of. Number one is that back then, there was no Russia. It was the Soviet Union. They weren't in the world marketplace. China, all people knew about China was Mao Zedong, and he'd been gone a while. India, India. What do they know about India? There was Gandhi. I think that was all people knew about India back then, even though he'd been dead a long time. What I'm trying to say was that there was no global economy back then. So it was a very different time, a very different place. And gold is at a very different place right now for me as well as I look at it, and it's for the long haul. Because as I keep looking at things, why would anybody want to hold paper currency as they keep printing more of it? And then as we look what's going on around the world, we see destabilization, as you mentioned, with North Korea. And here's my comment on that. What are we doing over there? It's none of our business. We have no business in Afghanistan. We have no business in Iraq. Our only business is in the United States. I hear these politicians every time it's convenient for these SOBs, when they're out on the campaign trail, they want to talk about our founding fathers. You want to talk about our founding fathers? Talk about how they told us not to get involved in foreign entanglements, one after another.
Yeah.
So today, as we did our Trends in the News feature, I talked about the bomb blast yesterday. That's right. I let it off with it. That the deadliest attacks hit Baghdad, where multiple car bombs and other explosions killed 25 people. In one attack, a parked car bomb exploded at a bus station in the eastern suburb of Kamalaya, killing 4. 2 more car bombs exploded in a rare attack in a parking lot near the heavily guarded entrance to Baghdad International Airport. 3 people were killed. Around sunset, a parked car bomb exploded near dealerships in the eastern Habia neighborhood, killing 10. It keeps going on. In and around ethnically mixed northern city of Kirkuk, 3 parked car bombs went off downtown simultaneously, killing 5. Another one killed 7. It goes on. This is one day. One day, thanks to the United States. Hey, the world is better off without Saddam Hussein. Oh, and by the way, 3 people were killed in Boston.
You know, even if this bears out, and I was watching the media, Gerald, on this one, is this the work of right-wing groups here in America? They've already got 300,000, according to Department of Homeland Security. They've identified 300,000 potential terrorists living inside the United States. And as I'm looking at this, okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Say that it was a Middle Eastern terrorist that performed that little... it was an oversized firecracker as far as improvised explosive devices go. There's an old saying, if you're going to commit a crime, make the crime worth the time if you get caught. In other words, don't steal small, always steal big, and plan well. Well, this little bombing here in Boston yesterday, if it was, and I'm just saying, if it was some kind of Middle Eastern operative, who knows, Saudi, Iranian, who knows? Let me ask the question, was it a righteous move for us to kill 500,000 children in Iraq over the supposed weapons of mass destruction? That's the lie we went into Iraq with, to supposedly get rid of somebody that was just as bad as Adolf Hitler. And then we see what shape we've left that country in. It is a fractured nation. You have different political aspirations, one party trying to get a leg up on the other one. Death and destruction. The country is basically destroyed. And the question that I have, if in fact there was some Middle Eastern bomber that just got pissed off with all the death and destruction the United States has delivered in the past 20 years in the Middle East, would they be faulted if, say, the tables were turned?
Well, I want to tell you a quick story. I used to be on Oprah, the Today Show, Good Morning America. They used to fight for me, actually, to get me on the new year, to have my top trends between the Today Show, Good Morning America, and the CBS Morning News. And then what happened was on December 14th, anyone could go to our website at TrendsJournal.com and look it up. USA Today used to run my top trends. So my top trend for 2001, a headline read in USA Today, 2001 won't be our year, TrendsSeer says. And I warned that a wave of anti-Americanism would sweep the globe and Americans wouldn't be safe at home or abroad. Several months later, 9/11 happens. Now, I've been writing about this for years in my book, Trends 2000, which I wrote in 1996. In the Trends Journals, I've been writing about Crusades 2000 since 1993. And exactly for the reasons you said. Americans propping up these dictators around the world, the people impoverished, and forcing them into the quarters of charismatic clerics because they had nothing else to lose, and that they would have attacks in the United States. And I'm writing about this for years. So now 9/11 happens. All of a sudden, I get flooded with phone calls from the Financial Times, New York Times, you name it, every station. What happened? 9/11. Again, forgetting whether or not it was an inside job or not, only as the things are unfolding at the time. And I'm not taking a position on any of them. And I just said, they asked, why did it happen? I said, listen, I've been writing about this for years. How could the United States go and prop up these governments all the time, robbing the people, they have nothing, and they're angry? It's payback. No, it's not. They hate our freedom and liberty.
Oh, God.
Exactly. I said, what, are you kidding me?
The narrative, yes.
That was the narrative. Now I'm not being called on half of them. And then the Afghan war breaks out. Ask me what's going to happen. I said, why ask me? Why don't you ask Alexander the Great? Ask the British, ask the Russians, and they're right next door. They couldn't pull it off. What makes you think the Americans are going to win this war? You're either with us or you're with the terrorists.
Uh-huh. Another narrative. Thank you, Mr. Bush.
And then the Iraq war breaks out. I'm still popular with the major media. Gannett asked me to do an editorial on it, an op-ed piece. Went in all the Gannett newspapers. What's going to happen with the Iraq war? I said, it's an easy one. I said, given the size of the American military, they'll have a swift battlefield victory in Iraq. They'll overthrow Saddam Hussein. It'll devolve into a civil war, and Americans will leave after they've lost too many men, too much money, or the will to keep fighting. That was it. That was the end. I proceeded to go broke from basically around 2003 to 2007. I had so few subscribers left to the TrendsJournal that I just wanted to quit writing it. But people signed up for 1, 2, 3 years. And I had an obligation. I didn't have enough money to buy off the ones that signed up for more than 1 year. So I kept writing it because I didn't think it was honorable just to, shaft them and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote about, in 2007, I forecasted the panic of '08. And in chapter and verse, I said what was going to happen to the real estate market, with the leverage buyouts, with the derivatives. I nailed it perfectly. And then I became even more popular than I was before. The moral of the story: money counts more than morality. When I was right on the money, then I was a big hit. When I was right about morality, nobody wanted to hear it.
The new god is profit-making, and we seem to be under the spell of corporatism, and any good CEO, and let's face it, for any corporation, his number one job is to expand, expand, expand. It's not about maintaining market share. It's about gaining more profit. It's how do you gobble up the competition, how you engineer stock buyouts, whatever the case may be. But we're entering into a different realm that many people do not understand the thinking. They don't understand. Well, what do you mean General Motors is too big to fail? What do you mean the banks are too big to fail? We have jobs that we've got to maintain. We have an economy we have to keep propped up, and we're going to go to any lengths to make sure that that happens. This is the wrong approach. It has been, and they're going to continue to do the same thing. And Gerald, I wanted to get you back around here of the knick-knack paddywhack, throw the dog a bone, and the dog actually being foreign banks that are buying up gold, because who benefits when they smacked gold and silver prices last Friday? They turned around, they did it again yesterday. Who's in that marketplace? Who's got the funds, or at least the funny money script, or enough of it, to go in there and start buying up large quantities of that stuff?
I agree with you. And the large banks, the central banks.
Well, and what a fall in the dollar's exchange rate, and folks, think about this. The Ouroboros, or, what we engineered after World War II, well, we've got an entire planet to help rebuild, so everybody's going to go on the dollar standard. Not one drop of oil will be sold on this planet without it being exchanged in U.S. dollars. Well, what happens when the U.S. dollar flies the coop and nobody trusts it? To the point that we engineered a little mortgage-backed security scam that infected the entire economies worldwide. So what do we have to lose here? Well, the fall in that dollar exchange rate would push up import prices. It'd fire up domestic inflation. The Fed might lose control over interest rates. The bond market might collapse. And then the value of the debt-related derivatives on the bank's too-big-to-fail balance sheets the financial system would be in turmoil. So what would be the obvious thing to do, Mr. Celente?
Well, got to kill gold.
Got to kill it. And I'm looking at this, and I actually watched Stuart Varney. He had Peter Schiff on.
Oh, really?
Day before yesterday. And I'll tell you what, Peter Schiff's stock dropped dramatically with me.
What happened?
Because Stuart Varney was up there going, okay, well, wait a minute. The world's economies are collapsing. Countries are going bankrupt. We have all these problems. Why is gold and silver being whacked? He turns it over to Peter Schiff, and Schiff just goes into a diatribe as to why he's in a position to buy, and he has been for many years, with no explanation whatsoever as to why it would benefit them to whack the gold and silver prices. What benefit?
It's so simple. It's so simple. Anybody can see it. They're devaluing the currencies in front of our eyes. What do you want to call it? QE1, QE2, QE3? We want to call it ongoing monetary transaction, long-term refinancing operations.
Oh, recapitalization projects?
Yeah, how about Japan buying up and sending out $1.4 trillion to boost their economy? Where's this money coming from? They're making it up. So what they're doing is they're keeping people to believe their lie. That's the way I see it. To me, it's when people see that their currency is being debased, when they understand that there's no recovery, and it's not an assumption. There is no recovery, and what you talked about, corporatism, or as more appropriately as I see it, which is part of corporatism, is fascism, the merger of state and corporate powers, by definition. And I get emails and people say, no, that's not the definition. Yes, it is.
Yes.
It's Mussolini's definition for fascism. The merger of state and corporate powers. And that's who's in charge. Nothing has changed from the time of Jesus Christ to James Madison to the world today. The names have changed, but the money changes, crimes are the same.
Well,
history. This is James Madison. History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. It cannot be clearer than that.
Do you know, last Wednesday, and here was another one that Stuart Varney should have put in his pipe and fired up for his listeners. Last Wednesday, the Kennecott, Utah's copper Bingham Canyon mine, about half of it disappeared. They had a major slide. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's 16% of U.S. annual silver supply. It just ran down the mountainside. Now, I'm not an engineer, but I'm looking at this situation and going, wait a minute, I can make some hay out of this. I don't have to dig or blast. It's all come to me. I'll just pull the stuff out and send it to the refinery. But having said that, last Wednesday, the mine collapses. It produces 500,000 ounces of gold annually, 16% of the U.S. annual silver production. They are saying that between 3 to 5 million ounces of silver a year comes out of that mine. That happened last Wednesday.
Right.
The markets get whacked Friday. They get whacked harder Monday. And then we're in the middle of Boston Marathon. Oh, excuse, scratch, scratch, scratch. We're going to war with North Korea. Scratch, scratch, scratch. What else is out there? And I'm Gerald, I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, you want to talk about wag the dog? How many more days do you predict that they're going to be carrying on about this Boston Marathon thing? How are they going to call and how are they going to pull in the official Department of Homeland Security diatribe? How are we going to tie all this together? Because we have terrorists here in this country. I'm looking at this, Gerald, and I hate doing radio on subject matter such as this Because just as you have been minimized, because you said some not very popular things at some not very popular times going against their narrative, well, you're not the good old chosen boy. You're not the good old boy anymore that we can depend on to behave himself. Well, in the alternative media, we're the ones pushing that boulder up the mountainside. We're a nice clean stream, and our waters are running, but they've got the dams and they've got the sluices opened with the propaganda just smashing us in the face day after day after day.
And that's why we need people to help support what we're doing. Whether it's your station and your sponsors or us in the TrendsJournal, if they want to keep hearing what we have to say, they better put their their money where their mouth is.
Well, there were 12 alternative medias. They're down to 4 now, and I am one of them.
So it's crucial. We're a small operation, but we have a very wide following. But we do it because people subscribe to the TrendsJournal and see how it trends in the news every day. And so if the people aren't going to step up, then we're going to go down. And I don't only mean financially, in the sense that when everybody rises to a higher level, then they don't believe this baloney. Well, they don't buy into it. I'm out last night, and a guy starts talking to me, I got this letter from, blah, 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 and it was about gun control. We need gun control. And I said, listen, just before you keep going on, let's make this really clear. And he's a friend of mine. I said, every major mass assault, murders have been caused by people on psychotropic drugs. I said, you don't hear one word about that. This isn't an issue of gun control. It's an issue of mind control. And the minds are being all screwed up by Big Pharma. I said, who advertises on all these shows? Who advertises the news? You watch the news. Who are the advertisers?
Who puts the funds into political campaigns?
Exactly. Every drug company, I'm sick of hearing these stupid ads. 5 seconds of how it's going to help you, and 25 seconds of how it's going to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And people believe this stuff, and they do. And by the way, the person that made it possible to put there were no drug ads on TV until Bill Clinton put them on. 1997.
Well, isn't it odd that the distillers of America can't advertise their alcohol on air, but yet the legalized drugs we can?
Oh, yeah.
That has more, alcoholism, folks, I don't play around with this because I have firsthand experience. My father was an alcoholic. It killed him twice. They had to literally bring the guy back to life. Alcoholism is not a funny thing. But what the damage is, that's just the medication that people are using to numb themselves. That much I learned out of his experiences. But when I look at this, Gerald, when I see the unmitigated damage that's they're doing to children, the perfect scenario was set up, wasn't it? Let's make gun-free zones. Let's get people on these psychotropic drugs that their own studies. I forget which company. It was either GlaxoSmithKline or Lilly. I forget which. But they did their own internal studies with these Zolofts and these other inhibitors, these uptake inhibitors, and their own studies showed between a 5 and 6% chance that you're just going to go absolutely psycho on these drugs.
Oh, I know.
So, and on top of that scenario, let's make gun-free zones that are absolutely, while the rest of the country is armed, and we do have wingnuts that from time to time do bad things to good people with these evil weapons. By the way, Gerald, less than 1%. We saw Sandy Hook. And let's get rid of these evil assault weapons and these big caliber. Less than 1% of the murders in this country are committed with those type of weapons, and it's not even an assault weapon. It's a semi-automatic rifle. We've got Rahm Emanuel coming out in Chicago. When asked about the crime problem, he says, well, we still have to do more with that. And we're seeing the Congress of the United States debating on more gun control. Well, Gerald, I reminded people, Valentine's Day, what year was that? Yeah, when they got in there in the parking garage and decided with automatic and Thompson machine guns to murder the other criminal opposition. And I said what they should have done was made sure that they were both armed equally and then arrest the guys that were still walking and talking and arrest them as they came out. I've said, and it was kind of a flip thing to say, but there was a certain degree of honesty to it. With all these criminals that are murdering each other on the streets of Chicago, let's all put them in a Bears Stadium, Soldier Field, arm them up equally, and arrest those that walk out that are still alive. This is not a gun problem. It is a criminal problem. But
well, let's take it one step further. How about these guys that are starting wars?
Yes.
And that's my 4 rules of peace. Obama says that Assad has to go. Let's put him in the Arena di Verona, you know, the beautiful restored Roman amphitheater in Verona, and let him fight it out, man to man. You got to go. Hussein has to go. Bush and Hussein. Put him on pay-per-view. We could balance the budget with it. I'm sick of these people telling us that we should fight and we should go to war as they're being protected at home with enough security around them that, you know, they could walk through the battle of the bulge unscathed. You know, so if anybody wants to go to war, anybody wants to start a war, go. Leave me out of your psycho trip. And if you want to support it, you can't. If you're too old or infirm to go to war, send your money. I don't want to send mine. I am sick of being in foreign countries with my money. I don't want my money going to Israel. I don't want it going to Italy. If I was going to send it anywhere first, it would be Italy. I don't want it going there. I want my money staying home. I want the troops staying home. I want it, and if this is a incident in Boston that's blowback from, you know, and I don't know what it is, I'm not speculating, but blowback from America's foreign intrusions, guess what? The same thing happened against the French in Mali when they invaded at the end of December of 2012.
And ironically, the French jumped in there, and what was the one thing that Mali had that the French needed? Couldn't
have been gold, and right next door to them, uranium over there in Niger.
Couldn't have been that. Again, no,
because 75% of their energy comes from nuclear, and they're mining it out of a dirt poor country like Niger, which abuts Mali, and the China and India were going for new leases to try to get some of those uranium mines that are now being protected by the French. Oh, and by the way, in 2012, in 2012, Mali drew out 50 tons of gold. In 2011, it was 43 tons.
You know, Gerald, I'm sitting here. You only have a couple more minutes. I guess you've got to dive out here in less than 5 minutes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm looking at the markets. Gold right now, 1369.30, jumped up 1670 today. Silver, they whacked down to 2344, but I'm looking at the Dow Jones up 157. But I go down the list here. Well, the strength that the United States dollar, you know, the commodities got whacked, not just gold, silver, but they threw oil in there as well. I'm looking at the United States dollar. It got whacked more than 50 cents. It's back down to 81.81. What are they going to do next to try to prop up this failing species of stuff that they used to call the United States dollar?
There's nothing they can do. And what I think they're going to do is take us to war. And that's what I keep writing about. That was the top trend of 20...
War on who? On the American people or just
both.
Anybody they just...
Anybody that they decide to.
Yeah.
And they'll get the people's mind off the tragedy of what's going on economically. Look, go back to 2000. The NASDAQ crashed from 5,000. What is it at now? About 3,300?
Mm-hmm.
12 years later? 13 years later? What happened? We're in a severe recession. I remember it well. People hated George Bush in August of 2001. They couldn't stand him. But all of a sudden, 9/11 happened. Got people's minds off that NASDAQ crash, didn't it? When that dot-com bubble exploded. Oh, and by the way, just to add a little more into it, they lowered interest rates to 46-year lows and propped up the economy.
Well, geez.
People forgot about what was going on, and I think that's what they're going to do again.
Gerald, and, don't worry. This year, if you don't have enough money to pay the IRS, well, if you don't have more room on your credit cards, which now you can't bankrupt if you have to file personal bankruptcy, that debt is forever. But if you are having a hard time paying your income taxes, guess what? You can now borrow the money directly from the IRS at 3% interest. Isn't that sweet? And
don't forget those student loans.
I'm telling
I know.
Gerald, I mean, how
fascism is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's the merger of state and corporate powers. You can't make this stuff up.
No, and you can't make it work, well, unless you're sitting on the other side of the fence and you're with the corporations and you're with the banks. Otherwise, you lose. Well, Gerald, we got cut short. I had to skip 2 breaks to get you in uninterrupted for a half hour. But
thank you very much.
I'm more than happy to do that.
Because I appreciate being on with you, and thank you very much, and thank you for all that you're doing.
TrendsJournal.com, Gerald Celente, there he goes. Thank you, my friend.
Bye-bye now.